Facebook has extended its ban on U.S. President Donald Trump's account. CEO of the social media giant, Mark Zuckerberg, announced a short while ago, saying the risk of allowing Trump to use the platform during this period is too great. Zuckerberg says this will be reconsidered in the next 2 weeks when the transition of power has been completed. Meanwhile, Twitter expected to restore access to Trump's account hours after the tech giant blocked him. Now, as the world continues to react with shock at yesterday's siege on Capitol Hill by Trump supporters, we ask the question, what do those events unveil about America and the future of American politics? Joining me to unpack this is Associate Professor at Howard University, Dr. Krista Johnson. Dr. Johnson, a pleasure to have you on the program. I first want us to start unpacking race relations in the U.S. Now, Wednesday saw a thin deployment of officers as rioters stormed the Capitol. Now, in June, a very different scene unfolded in the same city during the Black Lives Matter demonstrations. The contrast between the law enforcement reaction to the storming of the Capitol and the suppression of peaceful protests during the Black Lives Matter protest is not just stark, it is literally black and white. Now, does this set a precedent for what is acceptable, or this event needs to be condemned?
Well, thank you for having me, Nhlahla. Obviously, this event needs to be condemned. I think that what's unfortunate, of course, is that Americans are viewing this in some ways from different perspectives. African Americans and people of color in this country are perhaps less surprised at what happened yesterday than many white Americans. And so this isn't a precedent because, in fact, as we have known throughout our history, that these disparities in terms of treatment and in terms of expectations of threat and violence and whatnot have been occurring in our country for many, many decades and really going back to its inception.
Now, the events at Lafayette Park in June 2020 represented a defining moment in the Trump presidency. So will yesterday's scenes. Now, in this context, what legacy will Trump be leaving behind when he finally vacates office?
Yes, no, this is his legacy, right? So, and I think that that's abundantly clear. And anyone who chooses to kind of go down with the ship with him will continue to support him. But I think it's quite clear today with the statements, really not just from government, but it's really, as you said, Facebook has come out making very, very strong actions, really taking very strong actions against the president. We're anticipating now the Democratic leadership in the Senate has already called for the removal of President Trump. We're anticipating House Speaker Nancy Pelosi to do the same. So you're seeing it in the political sphere, but also in the business sphere and in the private sphere. Institutions and organizations are stepping up and saying enough is enough. So I think that it is clear that this presidency is really going to go down as being the worst presidency in American history.
Now, one big difference was that Trump was driving the deployment in June. He was very silent yesterday, apparently unwilling to set troops on his own supporters. Now, the New York Times reported he resisted calling out the National Guard. Now, the deployment was finally ordered by the acting Secretary of State, or rather Defense, Christopher Miller. What does this tell us about the president's state of mind during this time in his last days in office?
I think it's consistent, to be honest, with what we have seen throughout his presidency. He has not, he has supported and certainly tacitly at least supported white supremacy and these far right organizations throughout his his presidency, and has not been willing to speak out against them. I mean, there's numerous examples of this beginning back in Charlottesville, which was the beginning of his presidency. And in contrast, of course, he has made remarkably strong statements against peaceful Black Lives Matter protesters and other protests that had occurred in Portland and other major cities this summer. So I think this is not kind of to be honest, that's why I'm saying this is not really a revelation in terms of who this man is. I think for those of us who were paying attention from the beginning of the presidency, we understood who this man is. A supporter of white supremacy and someone who's really not capable mentally and otherwise to be the leader of this country.
Now, the mob that stormed the seat of the U.S. democracy yesterday had also openly talked about such a plan, and they were explicitly intent on overturning a fair election. And some had even hinted they might be carrying guns. They were almost all white. Now, many were openly white supremacists, and yet the thin Capitol Police collapsed in their path. Now, we've seen leaders around the world condemning what transpired yesterday. What are you reading into the international reaction as into what happened?
I think it's interesting. I think you know, we've gotten some, I guess, a bit of a mixed bag of reaction. Our allies, of course, want to condemn the actions, and then though don't want to, I guess, make too much of a fuss of this in hopes of not jeopardizing Biden, the new presidency, and the new administration's opportunities to, of course, correct course and hopefully, you know, remain a strong ally on the international scene. Of course, our adversaries are taking full advantage of this and saying, you know, that this is the banana republic, right? The great United States of America has actually shown itself to be, in fact, a banana republic.
So let's speak about the days to come. I mean, we're only just about 2 weeks away from the inauguration. What lessons should be learned from yesterday's scenes? And what can we expect, especially as the new president, Joe Biden, prepares to take office?
Yes, I think that given our system, I'm not too sure if it's likely that President Trump will be removed from office, because although we have the 25th Amendment that the vice president and the cabinet can utilize to remove him, that's a bit, or could end up being a lengthy process. And as everyone knows, we only have 2 weeks left until the inauguration of President Biden and Vice President Kamala Harris. Likewise, while Congress has the power to impeach, and I expect that probably there'll be a lot of calls to, at the very least, initiate that process, even if we cannot complete it by the end of President Trump's term. But still, probably unlikely that he will be maybe officially removed from office. But certainly what you're seeing as well are a number of efforts to, in effect, basically isolate him and really remove the powers that he has. Vice President Pence yesterday was really the one coordinating the response with, as you said, DOD officials, national security officials, et cetera. So I think there's already moves to really remove the authority and the power from the president, even if he remains in office until Inauguration Day. I think moving forward in the Biden administration, there's really interesting well, I think this absolutely makes clear that the task for the Biden administration is not to keep in check the left of his own political party, but the task really for the country moving forward is the de-radicalization of the far right? Where the weaponization of racism and illiberal practices has been allowed to just go wild and rampant really for the past 4 years. But this started before. And so really the task is to really take that on head on. I think also it's unfortunate that yesterday's events overshadowed the historic victories that we had in the Senate runoffs in Georgia, where both Democrats, Raphael Warnock and John Ossoff, won those seats and beat the incumbent Republicans. I think that bodes well in terms of, it certainly sends a strong message to the Republican Party that this Trumpism, or this idea that you can hitch your future fortunes to Trump and his base, is not a winning strategy. But also the mobilization that took place there is really one that I think is going to bode well for democracy in the United States. The efforts of people like Stacey Abrams and Fair Fight that got out voters who typically do not vote. Our challenge in our democracy is that you have sophisticated systems of voter suppression and systems in place that really discourage people from voting. And all of that really needs to be changed now, because the manifestations or the results of that is that you have a group of white supremacists and far right, and it's a minority in this country, though, who believe that this is their country. And you saw that yesterday. They marched up onto Capitol Hill and into the Capitol, even probably knowing they weren't going to overturn the election, but to make it abundantly clear to everybody who was watching, this is our country, this is our capital, and we will do with it as we see fit. So the Biden administration, I hope, will come in and push back very forcefully on that.
Well, Dr. Krista, I really wish we had more time because there's really much to speak about in reaction to what happened yesterday.